Hello and welcome back. Sweet Nothings Crochet videos again. Today we're working on our the skirt portion for the In the Garden Sundress. This is the third video. So for the yoke and for the border, please check my earlier videos. So we were working with a small swatch like this, and this was the starting foundation single crochet row, and we worked the yoke on the top, right? Now for the skirt, you come back to that same first single crochet row, foundation single crochet row that you've done, and this is how. There are several ways to start. I just find this a simpler way to start. Now the yoke is working upstairs. You just turn it around, and then this is the skirt portion that you're going to be working now this way. Correct? You finish the yoke there, spin it around, you're back to your first FSC row, and you attach your yarn in the first foundation single crochet from the bottom. Alright? For the first row here, you're going to do the same stitch that you have done so far. That is again. The only difference here is that now you're going to be working in a round. So whatever bit you have done, the two parts of your yoke, you finished off the yoke, and then you attach the yoke, the front and the back together. So at this point you'll be working in a round. Okay, so you won't actually have this first stitch here as a V stitch. It will end up as a V stitch. So just bear with me. When I just work the first DC, you won't be working the first DC, you'll start straight with a V stitch. So you'll work a V stitch in the first stitch, skip 2 foundation single crochet, and a V stitch in the next V stitch, and you'll coordinate your V stitch of the top with the V stitch at the bottom. So you just work a V stitch at the same V stitch. You don't even need to check to see that you're skipping your 2 stitches. You just need to go directly in the same V stitch from the bottom, right? The V stitch still stays the same, is DC, chain 1 DC, and you work this all the way till the end and all around, working a V stitch in the last V stitch, and then you join with a slip stitch to the first stitch. Okay, for round 1, round 2, you'll go back into the first chain 1 space of the first V stitch, and you work a V stitch in that first chain 1 space, and V stitch in every chain 1 space all the way around. Now the last V stitch that you work, you join it with a slip stitch to the first V stitch. All right, do visualize that we have joined it. Now you'll continue working this small V stitch all the way from rounds 2 to round 4. So you'll repeat it twice. For round 5, I have changed the stitch and I've made it a medium shell stitch. For our medium shell stitch, we have 3 DC, chain 1, 3 DC. So you slip stitch into the first chain space, 3 DC, chain 1, 3 DC in the first chain 1 space of the first V stitch. Medium shell in the next V stitch, that's 3 DC, chain 1, 3 DC in the next V stitch, and you continue with this all the way till you reach the last V stitch. So that's 3 DC, chain 1, 3 DC, all the way till the last V stitch, and You will then join to the first medium shell stitch with a slip stitch. Okay. Now this pattern that I have done has worked perfectly for a younger child, for a 3-year-old. The flare, the perfect skirt, I think it will work perfectly from ages 1 to 3. If you're working for a younger child, I would suggest, you won't need such a long length, I would suggest that you work the V-stitch followed by 2 DC, chain 1, 2 DC, and then maybe for the last row you'll work a 3 DC, last few rows, a 3 DC, chain 1, 3 DC, so you get a perfect flare because she's a younger child. For older children, I would suggest that you start with the V-stitch as we have, come to the medium shell stitch, and then go for a large shell stitch, which is 4 DC, chain 1 or chain 2, 4 DC. Now, why is it chain 1 or chain 2? It all depends on how tight you work and how much space you have there in the center. I generally like to keep that as a chain 1, only because I like the flare. Can you see how it has flared up? See how it flares? And I like that, the fact that it's all full and flared and there isn't very much of a gap between them. But this is my personal preference. You could actually increase that to 3 DC, chain 2, 3 DC if you're working with a thicker yarn, or 4 DC, chain 2, 4 DC when you're working for an older child. But basically this is how you continue, and you can already see if this was just this is the top of the yoke, and you can already see just increasing it by this much, we've already got that much of a flare. And that works perfectly. My pattern has worked perfectly for the 3-year-old child, and I hope it works perfectly for yours as well. Do remember, not just subscribe to my videos, but when you do your project, firstly share my blog link. It was free for you. Share it for me, and also share your photographs with me. I'd love to showcase all your work on my Facebook page. Have a great day, and I catch up with you soon. Bye bye.